Thank you. And will you you'll continue admitting people from the waiting room, Greg, yeah? Thank you. Okay, first a bit of context. This workshop is part of the Trust the People learning programme. Trust the People is a movement which is trying to support the growth of community democracy in the UK in the hope that it will lead people to shaping a society that serves the needs of the people and the planet. It was born in Extinction Rebellion's Future Democracy Hub, but it now extends far beyond and is supported by people from a range of democratic movements and communities. It was started because we want change and because we believe that we can work together to create a society of which we are proud, in which everyone is able to thrive and not just struggle to survive. A society in which we address the climate emergency we're facing. But to do this, we need to reshape our democracy. This is what our online learning programme is all about. It's about supporting community democracy and about helping people share the skills to connect with and work with others to transform their local communities. It has 5 modules. Last week, we learnt about how to create healthy teams, focusing on enabling people to work with others in a supportive and empathetic way. Those tools and skills will also help you with this week's module, which is about engaging our communities. This workshop is about putting energy into looking at our local networks and seeing how we can engage with the people around us, how we can collaborate with existing networks, but also looking beyond that at whose voices in our communities are missing and how they can be included. It is the act of reaching out to people, be they similar or different, of building connections and of creating trust. So this is the structure of the session. That we're going to do a personal mapping exercise to start us thinking, and then there'll be 3 concept areas we want to focus on: local, collaboration, and inclusion. So we're going to have a check-in in breakout groups in a minute, where you're going to say your name and the gender pronoun that you prefer, how you're feeling, and think of the recent time when you felt like you belonged to a community. So there'll be breakout rooms of about 4 people, so about 2 minutes each. Okay. So Greg, you'll be putting people into breakout rooms, yeah?
I'm just opening them now. All
Thank
right.
you.
So that'll be 2 minutes each. So about 8 minutes in total. And we'll see you back here.
Okay, welcome back. We're going to do a personal mapping exercise now. So I hope you've got a piece of paper and pencil or pen. If you haven't, you might want to go and get that now. So as a small warm-up exercise to this workshop, we're going to start by taking a few minutes to draw a map of ourselves and our relationship to others. You should be in the middle of the page, and you draw lines coming off which represent your closeness or distance to a person, community, organization, or group. This is to get you thinking about yourselves in the wider ecosystem and the relationships that you have. This is important because this is a personalized journey. Greg is going to show an example of his personalized map.
Yeah. Okay, just to make sure we all get the gist, I'll show you one that I made earlier. So here's me in the middle, and on the outside we have various groups, people, institutions I am connected to. Yeah, so closest to me, perhaps at the moment, is the people I live with. I'm getting closer to a new guerrilla bench making crew that I've formed where I live to put benches in the town. And my family are a little bit over here at the moment. Yeah, I've got my local group that I'm not massively close with, but probably closer to the Northern Rebellion that's happening. Yeah, there could probably be more on here. There could probably be more sort of institutions maybe, or sort of organizations, maybe that I've been through, you know. But that's it. Hopefully that's a little taster. I hope that's sort of helpful.
Yeah, and obviously that's just Greg's idea. It's not for you to copy, but just to give you an idea of how to do it. I'm going to give you 3 minutes of writing time to do that. And then I'll ask for feedback at the end from a few people, but you won't have to share if you don't want to. This is an exercise for you. So 3 minutes starting now. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I can see lots of people working hard and really thinking. So remembering, if you want to give some feedback, just write stack in the chat. Who would like to give feedback and share anything that they noticed from doing that exercise? By the way, we're going to move on in a minute, so sorry to the people who put their names in the chat. Obviously, we've got to think about the timings of the workshop, and also do put questions in the chat, and if we can, we'll answer them, but I can't guarantee we'll be able to answer them, all of them, in the course of the workshop, but hopefully over the course of all the workshops you do, there will be a chance to have those questions answered. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Greg now.
Thank you. Can I just remind people to mute themselves if they're not speaking? That would be great. Thanks for that, Stephen, and thanks for everyone. It was really interesting to hear how you responded to that exercise. We'll come back to that as we go through the workshop and kind of, reflect on it in slightly different ways, I think. So the bit that I'm going to talk about is the first of the 3 kind of attitudes or orientations that we want to get to in this workshop. So Stephen introduced them at the beginning. We're going to talk about the idea of doing things locally, sort of idea of the local. We're going to talk about collaboration, and we're going to talk about inclusion. And throughout these 3 sections, sort of ideas of relationships and friendships and neighborliness are going to kind of re-emerge. So starting with the local, actually just want to start with a fun tech experiment. And I've done this once before, so it should work. I want to start with a poll and ask you all how many neighbors you know that live near you. So on your street, actually. So how many people on your street would you say that you know sort of fairly well? So I'm going to run the poll, and hopefully that'll make sense to you. Let me know if you can't figure out how to answer it. Great. Most of us have voted. This is so impressive. You see, I expect people to know way fewer people than they do in this group. I think it's a self-selecting group in this workshop. I think the people that come to this workshop are already doing pretty well at the kind of stuff that we're advocating. Thanks, Julia, for commenting on my hair. Appreciate it. So I'll end the poll and then we can all see the responses. So most of us know sort of between 4 and 8 people on our street, which I think is really impressive, actually. So I want to take a minute before really diving into this idea of why we should try and connect with people locally. I want to take a minute just to go back into breakout groups and explore the question, what's your relationship like with your neighbors? And what could happen if you all became much closer? So those are the 2 questions. I can copy them in the chat, that's all right. And yeah, and then let's just take, so we'll go in breakout groups, or actually we'll just go in pairs and we'll just take a couple of minutes each. Just resume the recording. I hope that was interesting. I'd love to take a few, like we did last time, a few thoughts, reflections on that came up. So if we just do type stack in the chat, if you feel like you've got something you want to share with the group. Thank you so much, Kate. Yeah, that is kind of like an astonishing thing to say, because that's a big part of what I wanted to say. So one of the reasons why we sort of as a group thinking through these like difficult problems of how to engage communities, one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this idea of being a neighbor and kind of revive that, so you call it kind of like a category of belonging maybe, is because local concerns and issues can become much more concrete and tangible than say the big kind of abstract political things that tend to divide us. So as you said, yeah, you can build a tool sharing shed without having to agree about Brexit. And these sort of concrete issues that we're facing together can be big sources of unity. And that's kind of a big part of the project, is looking for all the common ground that exists and trying to bridge the huge divisions that exist in our society. And so you talked about the political divisions that exist. Obviously, like, that's only one type of sort of social group and social division that there is. There's all kinds of others that we really need to try and work through if we want to build a genuine sort of connected democratic culture. And so this is something I learned in London, talking to Black activists organizing in East London, that one of the most practical ways to try and bridge racial divides, socioeconomic divides, is actually going to get to know your neighbor. And this won't work for everyone, because it's possible that you live in a place that's quite socioeconomically segregated. But in big cities especially, there's actually a lot of diversity in an area because of the way that council housing has worked historically. And so her recommendation to me was really strong. It was like, go and get to know, she quoted the Quran. She said, the Quran says you should know 20 neighbors in this direction and 20 neighbors in this direction. And it really struck me, and I felt like I had to bring it here, because that's a big part of what we want to do. So those are sort of two two of the reasons why I think it's important to try and become more of a neighbor. And I guess just some last thoughts on that. I think we probably already kind of know this, but a big part of a new regenerative economy is going to rely on a lot more happening locally as well. And as we've seen with COVID, in times of crisis, it's the people that we're near that we're going to rely on for support. And so building kind of resilience really has to start with where you are. And there's something that is a bit hard to articulate for me, but is about there's a kind of uniqueness to the relationships that you can form with people that you live near. And it reminds me of the sort of strangeness of like family connections, where it's obviously more extreme with family. It's not the same as a normal friendship. And I feel like it's because when you live quite near people, there's this sense that like you can't exactly choose them. And because of that proximity, there's a real potential for like quite a closeness to form. So that's the other thing that I just wanted to kind of scratch, I guess. That's that possibility for a particular kind of relationship to form with neighbors, and that being an interesting thing. So first big action point from this workshop for you all is go and talk to 3 new neighbors who you've not spoken to before. And that kind of rounds up that particular section. I'm going to pass back to Stephen now for talking about collaboration. Stephen, you ready?
Yes, thank you, Greg. Okay, so thinking about collaboration and who we could start to work and engage with in our communities. Importantly, no community is a blank slate needing to be filled with any one understanding of community and/or democracy. Communities are filled with formal and informal relationships between individuals, groups, and organizations, and understanding these will help determine the role that you might be able to play and how to support a community's democratic culture without needing to reinvent the wheel. So, who can we start to engage with? We've categorized this into 3 areas. The first one is the usual suspects. People who share our values is the second one, and people who don't share our values is the third one. Starting with the usual suspects, these are NGOs, charities, councillors, community projects, faith institutions, social enterprises, looking for people or groups who've been constructing a new system of operation for a while. On this slide, we've put it, so I think, do we need to go to the next slide, Greg? Yeah, thank you. On this slide that you can see now, we put in some larger democratic organizations who might have some local chapters in your community. It's really useful to connect with the members of these organizations. For showing where useful connections can be made, this is a good place to start, but not the end. This bubble is fairly easy to start with because, as I've mentioned, it's engaging with people who are trying to do similar to the work we're trying to do. So let's just take a minute now to look back at your personal map, which you drew. Have you got any usual suspects on there? Maybe circle them if you do, and just be aware if there aren't any of the usual suspects on your map. 1 minute to reflect on that. Thank you. Actually, just in answer to a question in the chat, I'm not sure that the the square, the blue and white square symbol at the top. Greg, can you enlighten us if you know what that was for? I'm a bit embarrassed that I don't know, but.
No, now I'm embarrassed. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Stephen. I'm going to ask Jess who made the slide, and I'll let you all know.
These are the usual suspects that would be easy, relatively easy to reach out to. Because they, well, relatively easy compared to the other ones. We're going to come on to the other groups who you'll see are more difficult to reach out to. Another reason it's useful to connect with the usual suspects is for when we would like to map out who isn't being included and who isn't engaged. So we can say, so these are the people here and doing this work, who's missing? And this is a good question to be asking ourselves throughout our community work. Who's missing from this conversation? Who isn't engaged yet? Greg will speak a bit about inclusion later in the workshop, but for this part, we think there are two main bubbles to characterize this. One, people who share our values. These are people who are open to ideas of pro-democracy and pro-community, but aren't engaged yet. And then there's people who don't share our values. I had an interesting conversation with the partner who we were talking about this. This group can make us feel more uncomfortable, and it's more tricky to talk to the people who don't share our values. With all of that in mind, we're going to do a bit of personal reflection and then get into smaller groups to share and think more about this. So first question to think about, and maybe to make some notes on, is think of a time when you felt excluded from a space or a group. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to think about that. And then the second question I want you to reflect on is, think of a space in which you were part of a group and other people maybe felt excluded from it. What was going on and what were the consequences, either for you and or for the group? So another minute to reflect on that. Okay, we'll stop there. We're now going to share about those last two things in groups of three, the things that you've just made notes on. You're going to have around 10 minutes, and yeah, so breakout rooms for three for 10 minutes. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you everyone for engaging so much with the questions. Okay, we're going to have a 2-minute break now to go to the toilet, get a drink, whatever you want. So please try and be back in 2 minutes. Okay, bye.